In today's video, I'll show you how to use the Clay Sculptor. And yes, as you could probably tell by the title of this video, this will be a full tutorial for total beginners, showing you how you can use the Clay Sculptor so that you can build clay tables without having to build it enrichment by enrichment, but rather you can build it using this ChatGPT-like way of just conversing with AI and telling it what you want it to build completely from start to finish. Now, before we jump into it, as soon as you log into your Clay account, you should be able to see at the top of the screen, it will tell you what can we help you build today. It will give you four main options, whether it's list building, account research and scoring, inbound lead enrichment and routing, or personalized outbound. And based on this, you can basically just chat to it and tell it what exact clay table you need to have built out. However, there are a couple of caveats, and I want to address those straight away before moving on with the video. And specifically, before we even consider using the Clay Sculptor, you need to understand that clay more or less can only do 5 things for you in total. And those five things are as follows. The first thing that Clay can help you do is to source data. In other words, it can help you find companies, find people, find job data. The second thing that Clay can do is it can help you to enrich data. So in other words, you may have a list of companies, it can help you find the company names. Or you may have a list of prospects, it will help you find their LinkedIn profiles. Or it can help you find email addresses using its email waterfall, right? You see where I'm going with this. So sourcing data, enriching data, I'm sure you're familiar with. Thirdly, a super common feature of Clay is to qualify data, whereby you provide Clay with some information about your ICP. And based on your ICP qualification criteria, you can determine if a company or if a person fits that ICP. The main feature that Clay is renowned for right now probably is personalizing data. So in other words, it can help you personalize email outreach on the basis of a bunch of research that you have done using Clayagent. And then finally, the fifth thing that you can do with Clay is you can send that data elsewhere, be it your CRM, your email automation tool, your LinkedIn automation tool, whatever you choose to do with that data. And yes, there will be some Clay nerds in the corner saying, hey, this is 99% correct. There are some other use cases with Clay. But no, you're wrong. And yeah, you could be right. But 99% of the time, as a generalization, these are the only 5 things you will be trying to achieve with clay.com. So given that, this is how we're going to break down our learning. So as long as we understand that there are only 5 things that Clay can do for us, we can now break down any sort of prompting that we do with Clay Sculpt using these 5 things. So the first thing you need to ask yourself is, what the hell do we want to do with Clay in the first place, right? And let's just imagine for a second that you want to do what 99% of Clay users do, whereby to start with, you want Clay to help you source data. After that, you want Clay to enrich the data for you. Then you want it to qualify the data. And then on the basis of the data that is qualified, you then want to find people working at these companies. Now, let's imagine for a second that we're targeting companies with 50 to 200 employees that offer some sort of accounting services in the US market. That means that the first thing that we need to do is use the Clay Sculptor for company data sourcing. So the first thing will be just sourcing the company data. And throughout this video, let's just go through step by step from start to finish of how we can use Clay Sculptor together in order to just get started with having a list of companies and go all the way through to the final step of sending some emails out to our email sequencer. So we're going to go through all 5 of these steps, and I'm going to show you how I would go about using the Clay Sculptor for this. And I think this will be the most educational way to showcase the actual capabilities of Clay Sculptor. So to start with, I'm just going to copy and paste this example of the kind of companies that we're looking for. So I'll say, find me companies with 50 to 200 employees in the accounting services space in the US market. And I'm going to click on this random toggle on the right hand side. Needless to say, similar to any sort of LLM or any sort of like chatbot, it'll take a couple of seconds to think, and it will basically create a filter for us inside of the companies page. And you could see right in front of me over here, it comes up with 2,000 companies that fit my criteria. And then it says, would you like to add any enrichments such as company website, funding, or tech stack? Not for now, but I want to enrich them with the year that they were founded, because this is the next step, right? We've just sourced the company list. We now want to enrich it. So I'm just going to say enrich with the year that they were founded. Let's do that. Click on this toggle, and it should basically come up with that within just a couple of seconds. And it says, great, I've added the founding year to your enrichment plan. You'll have the option to add this data to your table after you click continue on the right. Great. And then let's see what else we wanted to do. We also want to add this qualification that if they were founded after 2020, say bad fit, if they were founded founded before 2020 say good fit. And I understand right now you're probably watching and thinking, okay, but what can I actually learn from this? And I think what you can mainly learn from this is that if you break down and write down exactly the steps that you want Clay to take for you, if you write it down all the way from like, hey, what's the data? How do I want to enrich it? How do I want to qualify it? How do I want to personalize it? And where do I want to send that data? You can basically just prompt the Clay Sculptor to do that for you. So over here, it says, hey, you can easily add a column to your table that labels each company as good fit or bad fit after the table is created. So I think the first thing that we would need to do is click on continue, because that will create the actual Clay table for us. And then we can continue our lovely conversation over here with this tool. So now we can click on save and run 10 rows, because that will be quite useful, I believe. And let's see. I think we're back to square one here, because now it's adding the founding year of each company to the table. And you can see it's running. So let's just give it a couple of seconds to do that. And in cases, if it just forgets to do it for you, like it has done in this case, all we need to do is just click on chat with Sculptor again. And as you can see on the screen right now, yes, it's taking a while to do that, but over here it's just basically telling me the actions that it's taking. So in this case, it's building a founded date column. It uses a waterfall column to basically add the year that the company was founded and then writes like a formula and all of that stuff. So in the meantime, let's just wait for this to all to happen. But you just need to understand that basically as soon as you prompt it, it will take a couple of seconds for it to actually work. And then over here, founded year, we can click on add column over here. And then we can click on save and run 10 rows. Once again, we can talk about some downsides and, some downsides of using Clay Sculptor in some cases later on. But for the time being, I think it's completely fine. You can see it's chosen to use the waterfall technique for this. So let's see how this plays out. And we can see right in front of us over here, it enriches all the companies and it provides us with a year that all of these companies were founded. So it's got 1973, 1919, 2006, and so on. So on the basis of that, similarly to what we just talked about, we can now basically give it some other prompts. So if they were founded after this year, we can do this. If not, say something else, we can click on that toggle over there and let's give it a couple of seconds. As always, you can see it's going to take some time to load, which really tests our patience, as does any other AI tool on the market, because it takes some time to actually just implement some of the changes that you request it to make. And over here, whenever it implements any sort of changes, it gives you the option to try on 5 rows. So I'm going to click on try on 5 rows. And then over here, you can see it says good fit for all 5 of them, which I think is correct. And then now after that, all we now need to do is just click on refresh preview. And we can now click on add column at the bottom over here, and it will now add the column for all of these companies. Just to have a look at what other stuff it can do, it can also find me the owners of the companies with a good fit. So in this case, I can just say something like, find me the owners of the companies with a good fit and find their emails. Add this to a new Clay table. This would be really cool if it can actually pull this off. And for context, I think the real downside of using Clay Sculptor is that it just makes me a lot more lazy. So in a lot of cases, it's a lot more educational to use Clay manually. But of course, in cases like this, you basically just... Now with this one over here, it basically says you have 2 options. What would you like to do? And then now I'm just going to say that I prefer the find people source. And now I can click on enter, and that should basically start filtering. Clay Sculptor is great at building the initial Clay table, but as soon as you ask it to do some of the other separate steps, so for instance, find me the owners of the companies or find their emails or something of that sort, if that actually requires you to create a new Clay table, then that's the point at which it basically drops off and it tells you, hey, how about you go create it on your own, and here are the instructions on how to do that. So it's taken us quite far, but it hasn't taken us far enough to actually figure out, to actually build out the entire table. In this case, I'll probably have to rescue the situation and just call this table 1 company list, and then straight away over here I might just be lazy and just click on actions and type in Claygen, and in this case I'll just use Claygen to find the owner of the company. So I'll just say find the full name of the company owner that owns, and I'm going to select the company name and I'll put the full name only and nothing else. And now I'm just going to click on configure, switch the model to 4.0 mini, and in this case at the bottom I can just use AI to say only run if, and then if the status contains good, and then also I can just click on generate formula, and then output is correct, save formula. And then for the time being, I'm just going to click on save and don't run, and just run it across the first 5 rows, bearing in mind that I'm just doing this as a bit of fun today. I don't actually know how many credits I've got left. So yeah, luckily I've got 50,000 credits left, which, shouldn't set me back too much when I'm just running 5 rows over here. And let's have a look at what data this comes up with. You can see it comes up with the full names of the owners of these companies, in which case all I need to do is just add a new column for the response. I'll just say owner full name, owner full name. Let's now click on chat with Sculptor to see if it can actually find me the emails of the own full names of the owners based on their full name. And it claims that it can actually find the email addresses of these people. So I think if I just prompted it to use Claygen to find people's names, then it probably would have done that for me. And you can see the actual cost of finding people's details using Claygen is negligible. So I mean, if you're doing it across 100,000 people, you're pretty screwed because it will get expensive. But in cases like this, if I just need like a couple of thousand prospect, maybe it will cost me $20, but it's easier than you fiddling with other data tools to find the full names of prospects, especially now when it's harder to scrape Apollo and when, Apollo does not give you the most up-to-date contact info for a lot of prospects. In the background, we can see that it's basically loading a bunch of actions. It's basically just creating this work email waterfall for me, which, takes some time. So let's give it a couple of seconds to do that. And over here, I can click on add column, and that should add the column right in front of me over here, where I can just click on play, and you can see that you basically, and you can see that it already pre-fills the full name, the domain, and all that stuff for me. So if I click on save and don't run over here, I can now click into play over here for the first 5 rows and to see if the email waterfall works, which of course it works pretty well over here as I can see. And if I close this toggle over here, it basically finds me the work emails of all the prospects. So let's just recap. It's probably been about 10-12 minutes into the video so far, and we've already gone as far as finding a company list, enriched it with the year that the company was founded. We also qualified to see if the company is a good fit. We found the owner's details. We found the owner's email address. And now it's time to see if the owner has over 1K connections or followers on LinkedIn or not, and then output good or bad fits based on that. So the way that we can go about it is, once again, we'll just type it in over here. I want to see if the owner has over 1K connections or followers on LinkedIn. If so, say good fit. If not, say bad fit. And let's give it a couple of seconds to think and basically action all of this info for us, so we don't need to actually build any parts of this Clay table for ourselves. The cool thing about the Sculptor feature is that it also walks you through the logic a lot of the time, so it is somewhat educational, but I would say that you still need to know how to use Clay manually before you can figure out something like Sculptor. And that brings me quite nicely in this part of the video to talk about my course, which is called Unlock Clay. You may have heard of it. You probably saw a bunch of people posting their certificates on LinkedIn already, or maybe you read over 200 testimonials on our website, which you can actually just go and read for yourself. We have so many testimonials that, first of all, they just keep on going. And then secondly, over here, you can click on this button to load even more proof if you're not convinced from the very start. It is a great course, and it's the only course on the market at this price point. It literally just costs £100. It takes about 5 hours to complete, maybe a bit longer, but it is the best course on the market, so go check it out. And in the meantime, I hope that this has loaded, which in this case is done perfectly. So all we need to do is just click on add column. 99% of the time, I'm not even going to review like what kind of info Sculptor has come up with. All we need to do is just fill in the full name and the owner work email. And on the basis of that, it now runs another waterfall for us. And I think this waterfall finds how many connections every founder has on LinkedIn, because this is something that we need in order to qualify the founder to see if they're a good fit for whatever we're trying to do for them. So let's have a look. And I believe it basically scrapes their LinkedIn profiles for the number of followers. To be totally honest, this is somewhat different to the way that I would do it if I was doing it myself. And the credit spend is way, way higher than, what I would have expected if I was doing this on my own. But the benefit is the fact that this just does it automatically for you. You don't really need to think too much about it. And we are almost at a stage now where we can personalize the outreach. But in reality, all we need to do is just copy and paste this prompt again to remind it what it was supposed to do. So see if the owner has over 1K connections. If so, say good fit. If not, say bad fit. And let's see if Sculptor actually comes up with anything useful here, which I believe it should. And over here, you can see basically created a new column for us with a number of LinkedIn connections. So let's click on setup column, and we should see it for ourselves over here. And I believe all we need to do is just click on save and don't run, and just basically run 5 rows to see how many connections each one of these individual has on LinkedIn. Now, for this specific enrichment, to be totally honest, it would have been way faster if I just did it myself, because I know how to do it. And it's somewhat annoying for me to actually see that this AI Sculptor feature can actually do it for me, because in a way, it just takes double the amount of time as what it would have taken me manually to basically just find the connections and just add that simple enrichment over here. But let's give it a bit of time, because I do think that this is the direction where Clay is going, and this is the direction where like AI is going, to the point at which you need to know how you can just speak to AI and get it to mimic what you do manually already. And you can see over here, it pulls up the number of connections that a person has. So all I'm doing here is now I'm saying, see if the owner has over 1K connections. If so, say good fit. If not, say bad fit. And I'm basically prompting it for the 3rd time now. Imagine 3 times I have to prompt Sculptor for it to actually add a separate column afterward to say good fit or bad fit based on the number of LinkedIn connections that the person has. So let's give it a couple of seconds. I think Sculptor is thinking on the left-hand side here. Clayagent is thinking on the right-hand side over here. So it's absolute chaos. We're really putting all this AI to the test. And now it's building a formula column for us to see if these people fit our ideal client profile. Because remember, they only fit our ideal client profile if they have over 1,000 connections on LinkedIn. So that will take a couple of seconds to load as well. You can see it now comes up with a new column over here where it basically tells us if it thinks that the person is a fit for us or not. We can now click on add column and it should be added on the right hand side over here, which is pretty magical. So it says good fit or bad fit based on that. And essentially this brings us super nicely to the finish. Now it's about time that we just write a personalized email. The easiest way to write a personalized email, as you would know, inside of Clay is to click on actions and type in Twain. And once again, I don't really have an affiliation with Twain, but I do think that assuming that you're not emailing like millions of people, it can be cost efficient. So that's how we go about doing that manually. But for the time being, I'm just going to copy and paste the task. So I wanted to write an email using Twain, personalizing the first liner using a reference to their past experience and telling them that we helped a similar accounting business, ABC Advertising, to implement Clay to find new accounting clients within 9 weeks by going after newly registered businesses. And then I'm basically just prompting it with a specific call to action that I want to see in the personalized email. Let's see if it can actually pull this off, because if it can pull this off now in 2025, then honestly, we're screwed in a couple of years' time. AI will be able to just do a much better job than we can do manually otherwise. So let's take a look. Unfortunately, in this case, it says that you can't do the Twain personalization, so we kind of have to resort to what it recommends instead. And now I'm just going to say, yep, do what you recommend, and then just going to click on enter. And let's have a look what it comes up with, because now, no pressure, but it has to enrich LinkedIn profiles, and it then has to, after that, in one way or another, to personalize the email using Clayagent, I believe. So let's take a look at how Sculptor does this. As you can see over here, it basically has done all the work for me. This time it basically builds 2 different enrichments in a row, and it just says the email writer is ready to go. I just need you to accept the LinkedIn enrichment first so we can reference that data. Now I'm just going to click on add column because I honestly don't care about the kind of data that arrives here. And then now I'm just going to add the work email address, and now I'm just going to save and click on save and done, running over 5 different rows over here, just so we have some data points so that it can then write the emails. Now I'm just going to say go ahead. And I understand for you right now, you're probably observing this more through a sense of like, how do you actually communicate with this Sculptor feature prop? But the reality is there is no real step-by-step format of doing this. I think the easiest way to go about communicating with Sculptor is to just break down the steps into, like sourcing company data, enriching it, qualifying it, and so on. And on that basis, it's just trial and error. You just tell it like, hey, I want you to do this, see how well it performs. And over here, it just goes back on its promise of using Clayagent for this one, and it says, hey, Twain v3 actually does have a Clay integration, which, I don't know, like, why does it take it a second guess? I don't know why I didn't know that in the first place. If I know that it has a native integration, why can't it pick up on the fact that Twain has a native integration as well? But either way, let's just give it a couple of seconds, and it should now generate a personalized email. So once again, I don't know how good this email will be, but this will be a total reflection of Sculpt as a tool, in my opinion, because so far I have some mixed feelings. I like how fast it is and how it can basically just create custom enrichments for us that sometimes I can't even think of. But in reality, it's not as easy as you think. So in this case, I'm just going once again to click on add column. And for this, and over here, you asked me for a specific campaign. So in my case, I'm just going to probably just type in. So in this case, I'm just going to select a random Clay Learner campaign that I had before. It's already generated a bunch of different info for us over here. And now I'm just going to click on save and don't run, and run this across the first 2 prospects just to see what the email looks like, because I honestly have no idea about how it even went about writing this personalized email. So let's take a look. You can see that now the sequence has been generated. So let's click into the sequence. This is honestly the first time that I see these messages. So it shows us the research that it's done about the person, about the company, some insight about the person and their leadership in the company. It gives us some warning that in this case, the company is a financial accounting standard setting organization. It's not an accounting firm. Once again, this is actually really because it just means that it tells us this is the wrong prospects, and somehow they were still a good fit for us over here based on the qualifying criteria. And then over here, it gives us the persona that it falls into, and then finally the juicy part, which is the message. If we click into the 0, we can add it as a column, and we can just criticize it together. So let's take a look. And then over here, if I just click in, let's read it together. Hi, Rich. Your work at FASB Updating software accounting standards to match modern practices like agile development seems like a big shift for the field. This makes me think a new approach to client outreach could be right in. I'm running a short Clay mini course that shows how accounting teams land new clients by reaching newly registered business. I can send you the mini course for free if you'd be willing to give me your thoughts. Would you like me to send it over? Pretty decent if you ask me, but I don't know where you got that context. And then it says, hi, you moved from leading at PMI into helping IMA grow and expand. That's a big switch, and it's clear you bring real membership experience. Your interest in AI's future for accounting lines up with how blah, blah, blah. I can send over a short practical Clay mini course at no cost. Just reply yes if you'd like the detail. Once again, for the first draft, it's really not that bad. It's not as bad as you'd. However, here is the caveat. In total, Sculptor cost us probably 20 or 30 Clay credits per row. So in other words, if the goal of this Sculptor feature was to rip us off and to take 60 cents off us for each prospect that we want to email, then it's done a good. But realistically, it's not at a point right now. Okay, cool. So let's just magically assume that you made it to the end of this video and you just heard me say that Clay Sculptor, in my opinion, is not worth the hype for building your Clay tables completely from start to finish. You may be wondering your choices of using Clay in the first place, and you're probably thinking, okay, but what the hell can I actually use this feature for inside of the Clay tables? In my opinion, the best use case is for you to basically build out the Clay tables just like you would have built them before, enrichment by enrichment. And in cases whenever you're stuck, just click on Chat with Sculptor and use it the same way as you could use the GPT or some sort of like chat GPT chat otherwise. So just basically treat it like a little counseling session where you can say like, oh, hey, I'm struggling to do this. Give me some options of how I could go about using this enrichment or doing this specific action. And based on that, Sculptor will just advise you. It will give you some options. It can send you some articles or those kind of links, so you can just test those out for yourself. And based on this, the Sculptor chat over here can then give you a bunch of suggestions on the enrichments that you can consider using and that kind of thing. So that's, in my opinion, the best way to use Sculptor, because simply put, even if I work for like an enterprise company and I can afford to spend 2 credits on the first enrichment, another 2 credits on the second enrichment, and in total there are like 12 enrichments in this table, even if I overcome that financial burden that the Clay Sculptor puts me in over here, the final output does not look great. So it does mean that you just need to rely on the existing enrichments that you're already familiar with, because the challenge here is that a lot of these enrichments are not the kind of enrichments that I would have used in order to build this Clay table from start to finish. Bearing in mind that in total, this end-to-end video, after I crop out all the edits and everything, it will probably end up being about 40 minutes of filming. And in 40 minutes, I would have backed myself to build out this table from start to finish manually. And going forward, I would still be building Clay tables manually, just using the Sculptor feature to just chat with it sometimes. And in my opinion, out of all features that Clay has implemented recently, the only good feature that's, in my opinion, really speeds up the way that you do things is the functions feature, which is only available for anyone that's on the $800 a month plan or above, in which case I'll be looping this video straight after this one so you can check out the functions feature and to see why, in my opinion, it's worth the hype. If you have any recommendations for this channel when it comes to any future videos, or if you want to share any feedback on existing videos, by all means, just drop a comment down below, like this video if you watched this far, and make sure that you're subscribed so that you can stay tuned and keep up to date with all new sales tools, all new Clay features, and everything in between. Other than that, I'll see you in the next video. Have a good one. Cheers.